I try to be the first person to practice, and I try to talk to every single athlete, very similar to what Brendan just said, because kids will tell you how they're feeling, especially my kids, because the we value intelligence much more than some type of military toughness. That if a kid says, Coach, my shins are really sore, I'm like, well, you're taking today off. And sometimes they'll argue, oh, they're not that sore. They're not that sore. And I go, well, here's the deal. If we take today off, you're going to be 100% tomorrow. And I have found that to be almost universally true, that when a kid is feeling that way, as long as you don't pile on, they are usually 100% the next day. Whereas if I go back to my coaching back in the Neanderthal days, when I was a head track coach in 1990, and I had success, but we had success because I was a fairly charismatic coach that worked kids hard and got kids to really want to compete. It was not my training. My training was absolutely awful, and kids would come in almost limping from shins. And I would be like that guy that was like, rub some dirt on it. That this is, that you have to get used to living the sore life to be an athlete. And I think Brennan and I were both taught that. He's, half my age, but we were both, it's, if you really think about it, old school coaching is the same today. That guy that Brendan was talking about that ran the crazy workout and probably ruined those kids for the next 4 days. Old school work is the same today as it was in the 70s and the 60s. It's no different. It's still that Mamba mentality, more is better. If you're half injured, rub some dirt on it, and we're going to practice anyway. And that's not the way to keep kids healthy. And remember, if they're not healthy, they're not fast.
Yeah, 100%. And I think that's a huge point, Tony, about showing up, being the first one to a session. This isn't even from a coach's perspective. I'm not a coach, right? But even just as a former athlete, it's like I remember it was like once I would come to practice, and once we were in practice, it's like I would put the game face on and I would try to mask if I wasn't physically feeling well. So I think being there to see what face do they have on when they walk through the door before they put that mask on, of like, okay, now we're in training mode, just seeing how they show up. Like I always think when I was in high school, I'm a distance guy, but when I was in high school, our outdoor track was way up in this elevated position on campus, which was the dumbest thing. I always say they did it for character building because there was no wind stop. It was always windy up there. There was literally 100 stairs to get up to the track, right? And I would say like every track should have 100 stairs leading up to it, because coach could just stand up there and watch us walk up the stairs and know, how we were really feeling, Okay, cool. Well, we got a couple of questions in the Q&A here. So we'll hit those, and we've got a good number of participants here. We've got 75 people on with us here. So to the participants, to the audience, feel free to start dropping some questions in the chat, and we'll get to them and have Brendan and Tony answer them. So the first question from Jed, and this is open to both you guys, whoever wants to go first, is, do you use jogging laps for warm-ups? And I think that this was like almost partially addressed, but might be good to explicitly touch on it. Tony, let's start with you.
One word answer: we haven't run a lap in 25 years in practice. That's the furthest we've ever run as sprinters in the last 25 years, 200 meters. That's including warm up, that's including the cool down that we don't do. We literally, and people say, well, what do you do about your 400 runners? Same. Our hardest 400 workout is 3x200 with 4 minutes rest, timed. And that's called my 4x4 predictor. So running laps, I think, is counterproductive. And, having said that, I know Carl Lewis will watch his kids at Houston run 2 laps, and if they don't look good, he has them run 2 more. So if you want to follow a former Olympian, run laps, but that's not what I do.
Yeah, I would agree. I was part of the 2-lap crew when I was in high school, and we did 2 laps. And a lot of times during those 2 laps, it would get competitive. Like we're not even warmed up, and we're out there like worrying about winning the warm-up laps. Well, then you've now run a pretty hard 800 cold. And oh yeah, by the way, you have a 3.5-mile run. You're going to partner up at the end of the run and run up and down some hills for 15 minutes, and then you're going to run 3.5 miles back. Like if your goal is to run an 800 or a mile or a 2 mile or a 5K or a 10K marathon, whatever, 2 laps is fine. But if your goal is to be fast and sharp, I don't see a reason you would want to dull your blade before you cut.
Yeah. And I'm going to jump around here in the Q&A a little bit, but just because we're on the topic, there's a question in here. So what would be your top volume for long sprinters?
Well, I just answered that with 3 200s. And if people want to hear about my 4x4 predictor workout, they can just look it up, just type it in 4x4 predictor. We also do a 3x150, which is actually harder than the 200 because the predictor is to add the 3 times together of the 150, and which means they have to run really, really fast with only 4 minutes rest. And what that does is really extend the period of time that they are experiencing that high lactate acidosis feeling, which is not pleasant, but that is the feeling that you have to fight through when you want to surrender in the 400. So in my opinion, you could run 10 miles a day and run 10 400s a day, and it will make you worse in the 400. The 400 is a sprint. It is a long sprint, which requires an energy system called glycolysis. And glycolysis is wonderful, but the pollution that comes from glycolysis is pretty rough on the sprinter. And we just have to get used to it. We have to go that well sometimes.
My top volume might get me canceled. Uh, for my 400 guys or girls in the preseason, I mean, we'll do some pretty tough tempo work. I'm a tempo believer, but again, it's all within the context of everything else. So if the tempo is ruining the sprint work, where a kid feels like they're beat up every day we do tempo, then I have to adjust how we do tempo, how that's executed, the rest intervals, the durations, the intensities, obviously the volume. But for our hard days, I might program a 5-4-3, and in that 500, you might come through the 4 at 90-95% of your 400 PR pace, and then you're expected to finish. After that, take like 8 to 12 minutes, maybe even 15. You have a 4. Goal is to be around your PR. Then you take whatever rest you need. You have a 300, and whatever happens, happens. At that point, it's tough. But ideally, it's faster than your PR 400 pace. And that is probably the hardest day that I will program is a 5-4-3.
So you can run a 5 and a 4. I'm not being combative here, and still run faster in the 300 than your 400 pace.
Yeah,
Okay.
it's all in the it's because the rest is so long
Okay.
that you can actually bounce back. I've done that workout myself, and I hated it looking at it as an athlete. But we went through, again, this is college. This is where we're training 50 weeks a year. This is very different than
Right.
a high school setting that gets 2 weeks of preseason and then straight into competition. So, we're transitioning from indoor to outdoor. Coach Woody's at Arkansas with all the guys at nationals, and those who didn't make nationals got a 5-4-3. And I remember we went through the 5 in about 50, 51 through the 400, and then finished. And it was like 64 or 65 or something like that. 8 to 12 minutes, come back. We hit a 4 and 48. 8, 12 minutes, 15. I mean, I was blown. I was destroyed. My teammates were kind of, they were drafting on me, so I was leading everything. They came back through in that 300. They went 34-3. I went 34-9, and it hurt like hell. And since I had such a long rest, I had a chance to call Woody. I was like, Woody, it's a tough day out. We just crushed the paces. Are we good? He's like, no, you still got that 3. So we did it. Every one of those guys, I think, ended up going extremely fast at some point. And again, just because you go fast doesn't necessarily mean the workout's great or not great, but that's as far as I'll go, 5-4-3.
Yeah, and I think it's a really important that Brendan and I have had our differences, in the past. And we're one of those success stories where we were on the outs for about a year, and then we had a long conversation. And I think it's important that people understand that even just because we don't do tempo, I don't think that proves that tempo is wrong. I think that what I have proven is that you can get similar, if not the same, if not better results without doing it. But it does not prove that tempo is wrong. Now, the idea that I would never run my guys more than 200, I think is brilliant. What Brendan prefaced his stuff with was, hey, this is what we were doing at the University of Iowa at 50 weeks. And these are for guys that are totally bought in to track and field. Whereas in a high school situation, if I had a workout like that, I might lose two of my fastest kids because they're not going to put up. I mean, they're cats, and they just won't do that. Now, maybe they'll do that 3 years from now when they buy in at the University of Iowa. So there's so much nuance in coaching, and I think that sometimes in Twitter, and that's where Brendan and I butted heads. In short little blurbs on Twitter, sometimes you can feel like the other person is fighting you, and actually he just has a different opinion you need to listen to.
Yep. Brendan, it's a USR webinar tradition to say something that almost gets you canceled, but so that's totally okay.
Oh, people will get fired up for that for sure.
Yeah. No, in all seriousness though, like this is why we do these, right? It's like nobody wants to hear two coaches come together and just say, yep, I agree with everything this other guy says. It's like we want to find where those differences are so that people can take knowledge from both of you guys. So I appreciate you having the courage to bring that to the table, knowing that it might fire some people up.